Thanks for coming through, Mr. Sithebe. Njabulo is a good friend of mine. We met 14 years ago in 2006 when we were both younger. We were doing our masters in development finance at Stellenbosch University. He taught me a lot, especially regarding economics. He had done quite a number of things in his life, Gauteng department, KPMG, etc., etc. He's a well-accomplished economist and well-known in the country. Now, Mr. Sithebe, thanks for coming through again. When the year began, no one knew what we thought the economy is going to grow by at least 1%. This year, some economists were saying 0.2%, etc.,
yes.
etc. The rand was sitting at about 12, 13 rands to the dollar. As we speak, it's sitting at 19 rands. The estimates are 6.1 contraction in the economy. It's gone crazy, not just in South Africa, but worldwide. But let's talk within the South African context. What is the impact of this COVID-19 in brief?
Okay, so we have seen globally and indeed here in South Africa that this particular virus has actually changed the dynamics of how economies are organized. For instance, in South Africa, beginning of the year, as you said, we were still hoping that we can get growth that's just below 1%. However, now it is clear that there is no chance that we can actually step out of the recession in 2020. So the COVID-19 situation is actually one of the worst cases that have ever hit the South African economy post-liberation. In fact, I even dare to say, even when you were to go back to the 70s, 60s, this is probably the most difficult situation that the South African economy will have to deal with. I don't even think of a case in history where there's ever been projections that unemployment rates will go beyond 30%. Right now, with the narrow definition of unemployment, we are expecting that at a minimum, we are going to experience almost 34% unemployment rate. That is huge because that has other implications for how the economy is actually organized. Number one, it means that the dependency rates are going to go high. A lot of people are going to depend on the few people that are employed. Secondly, it puts a lot of pressure on social security. It means that the government, the state will have to itself come in and support a lot of households, a lot of families, a lot of firms. It also means that in terms of how trade takes place with our trading partners, with our trading partners both globally and in the continent.
That's right.
How that trade takes place is going to change as a result of this situation.
It's quite it's a scary situation. There will be a lot of changes that have to happen, obviously, to ensure a post-lockdown, or post-COVID, because the lockdown might end, but the impact of the COVID-19 is going to be huge. What do you think are the economic changes that are going to happen post this COVID-19? Maybe social as well as the economic changes that you anticipate are going to take place.
Okay, perhaps to just take one step back, I'd like to maybe just flight some slides so that we can sort of visualize some of these things that we are talking about.
Right.
Okay, if you don't mind, I just want to upload something here and share it with you. Are you able to pick it up on the screen?
You can see it. Thank you.
Okay. So I've already spoken to this global situation here that, when you look at this, the part that I'm circling, which is 2020, you can see that globally, whether it's Asia, Europe, or the Americas, we are expecting negative economic growth.
Right.
Okay. And and the sectors that are most immediately impacted are sectors that rely on social interactions, like travel, hospitality, entertainment, tourism, you know. But those sectors themselves, even though they rely on social interactions, they are backed up by other sectors, which are input sectors.
Right.
You know, like production of furniture, production of food, production of plastic, production of say tin. All those things are inputs into those particular sectors. We now know, as a matter of fact, that South Africa may not even have an aviation industry post the lockdown, because whether it's the state airline or the private airlines, everyone is struggling because of lack of tourism. And this is not about to change soon. So the ripple effect of that is that we are experiencing declines in income, layoffs, and people are unable to actually plan ahead. So when we speak about the sectors that are going to be impacted, I'll quickly get to those. When you look at this slide, you can see that almost no sector is spared.
That's right.
You know, what I've done here on this slide, I've just categorized to say of the sectors that will be impacted, there are those that have high negative exposure, the ones that have medium exposure, and the ones that are low exposure. To say you are low exposure does not mean that you are not impacted. It simply means that you stand a chance to survive. However, when you look at this picture, you can see on the high exposure that these are the sectors where almost everyone else is employed.
That's right.
Okay? But there's actually a positive side to these things. We know that pre the lockdown, when everything that people are wearing mostly would be sourcing it from international markets. Okay, people would be buying clothing from international markets, cars, all the components were essentially from outside. You know, toys, and pharmaceutical products. The possibility that now exists in the South African economy is that we can now turn these very items into potentially the sectors we can ramp up. You know, because South Africa does have the capability, by the way, of producing all the items that are listed under high exposure.
That's right.
The difference is that there was a lot of import penetration to those particular sectors. And I mean, there's all sorts of arguments of why we've had a high import penetration. Other people will talk about technology, others will talk about price competitiveness, you know, others will say, no, we didn't have sufficient skills to produce some of these goods. But historically, we all know that South Africa does have the capability to actually produce any of the items that are listed on the left-hand side. So now, what becomes the challenge? The challenge is, how do we reorganize our economy in such a way that we unleash the capability of producing these items? That's right. What other people call reindustrialization of the South African economy. You know, when for instance, when 1994 happened, our manufacturing industry as a percentage of GDP was over 20%. Right now, as we speak, only 13% of our GDP is manufacturing. What has happened over the years is that because we've outsourced almost everything, to China, to Europe, what then happened is that our capability to produce was actually shrinking all the time. However, it does not mean that all the people who were driving manufacturing during the earlier years are not in existence.
That's right.
That capability is still within us. It is something that we need to reactivate.
Can I just read the high exposure on the left-hand side for the viewers at home? It's clothing, apparel, auto manufacturers, auto suppliers, consumer durables, toys, gambling, leisure, hospitality industry, aviation, wholesale and retail, global logistics, pharmaceutical, metals and mining, manufacturing, financial sector, as well as creative stroke, live performances. That's the industry, that's the sector. Those are the industries that, or the sectors that Njabulo is saying we have an opportunity to reindustrialize as a country. Now, is this a great opportunity, Njabulo, for us to then stimulate the Black Industrialist Program, or to introduce the Black Industrialist Program?
Yes, indeed, it is a huge opportunity, and this is an opportunity that presents itself to us just at the time when we now have the Africa Free Trade Agreement. Mm. According to this trade agreement, we now can trade as African countries without any hindrance. Of course, there will be like logistical hindrances, etc. But I'm talking here about policy hindrances. This Africa Free Trade Agreement, what it does is that it harmonizes trade between the various African nations. And this is now one of the biggest markets globally if we make it work. Wow. Okay? So these particular highly exposed sectors, we can actually produce at scale amongst those, with the market not only being to target the South African market, but to take all the produce as a launch pad to significantly impact and give meaning to the free trade agreement. Mm. And of course, as we produce at scale, post the lockdown, in these various sectors, there has to be a lot of active logistics that are put in place, from rail to transport, to even issues that involve home affairs, as an example. Because you do want to produce an item, say in Soweto, and you want it to reach Ghana without any hindrances.
That's right.
But this is just at a high level. The question becomes, what will it take? Because we know our people have the capacity, the capability to produce. Okay? But where we do not always have capacity, it's the ability to finance all these activities.
That's right.
Now, there are two things that we need to do. We've now sorted the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which is about market access.
That's right.
Now, we need instruments to finance production, to finance machinery. Essentially, we need instruments to finance industrial policy.
Wow.
And we need to connect that with our trade policy in a very strong and practical way. Secondly, the issues of innovation become very important. If we are to intensify trade between South Africa and everyone else involved in the continent, it also means that continuously we must enhance our ideas. We must turn our ideas into products. And that whole process has to be done in a properly codified manner.
Right.
So financing of industrial capability, but secondly, a continuous process on innovation.
Njabulo, I mean, we've seen, thanks a lot. We've seen, the masks that have been developed by all people from all walks of life in every township, which is great. In every corner, people are producing beautiful masks. I mean, amazing masks. It's actually very plausible. People are using the sishweshwe. So this is someone who had the situation saying, well, here's an opportunity to now take that sishweshwe. Are you still there? Okay, to take that sishweshwe to become a mask. Now, are you basically saying a person who is based in Soweto, who is based in Mlazi, who is based in Tanzania, will now, through this trade agreement, will now be in a position from the backyard or from the garage or from their township, be able to produce something and take it to the market in Ghana, in Morocco, in Malawi, to the 1 billion potential market that we have?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we have seen, I mean, personally, I've been so amazed at the speed at which our people adapted.
That's right.
Thought of new ideas and started to actually produce some of the essential goods that will help us throughout this period. What does that tell you? It tells you that sometimes we think of an economy as an abstract thing, that is too far off from people's daily lived experiences. But what our people have taught us throughout this time is that all we need is a bit of encouragement.
That's right.
All we need is for you to say, here is a market. It was just overnight, we started to see all these fancy, locally produced masks. And suddenly we are like, wow, when did people actually think of all these ideas?
That's right.
And some of them are made out of fabric, some of them are made out of plastic. There's people quickly adapted to the new situation.
Yeah.
What is the lesson here? The lesson is that there are times where all you need to do is to unblock the opportunities.
That's right.
Unblock people's ideas. Give support where it is needed most. And actually, let us make sure that our people understand that the economy is nothing abstract. It is about daily lived experiences. The same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue.
Yes. So the same thing also applies, to how we can adapt some of our tourism facilities. We know now that for more than say for the next year, it will be very difficult for people globally to actually travel. So people are sitting at home with all these facilities. The question becomes, how can we adapt these facilities for domestically optimizable solutions? Because you may find that now there's a strong market for domestic tourism. So, and for us to connect the facilities to people who are interested in touring the nation, it may actually mean that there has to be a lot of innovative marketing, a lot of short lefts.
That's right.
So that marketing business on its own is actually a big possibility to exploit.
I spoke to, just to add to what you're saying, Njabulo. I think there are two things I want to speak about. The first one is
Okay.
the need for strong incubation in the country to incubate the small businesses so that they move from being small informal businesses to begin to and strengthen the quality control aspect and be in a position to supply the big retailers, both locally in South Africa, maybe initially locally, there are local retailers, and then they grow their businesses to be able to supply to other provinces as well, and ultimately to the continent. But I think what you're saying is we have an opportunity now. We've seen our people, they're not lazy. We've seen that our people are hardworking. We've seen our people are capable of, producing. We've been told that we should focus on construction, on the textile industry, on Shisanyama, on car wash. We've proved those people wrong, that we have a capability to manufacture. People were doing masks. They were doing alcohol. What is this thing? Sanitizers. They were mixing sanitizers. Yes. That's production. That's production. Now, yes. How do you take that to the next level? From that, because that's clothing and textiles. I'm a masks, and the other one is actually chemical production.
Petroleum. Yeah, in chemical. Yeah.
Yeah, it's chemical production. So how do you move that capability to the next level, from a backyard operation to the next level, from a small operation? But what systems do you need to put in place to make sure it is produced at a certain quality so that you can supply the retailers and then ultimately go to the level? So basically, we're saying this is our opportunity to strengthen our quality, and not just quality only, but to strengthen our incubation programs that we have in place, make sure that we move our people from that level to the next level. Just to conclude this point, Njabulo, I spoke to a very well accomplished black hoteler,
yes.
hotelier. He was saying, this gentleman, he was saying, a lot of people who are traveling, both local, domestic tourism, are going to typically avoid big hotels because they avoid big crowds, for a while. So they would prefer either typically Airbnb type of facilities, B&B type of facilities, smaller lodges, because they are not crowded because of social distancing. So in other words, the social behavior post-lockdown will also provide an economic opportunity as well for the smaller players or for the smaller operators. So in other words, those who have capacity to run, B&Bs, if you've got space, you should also start thinking about B&B opportunities, because if people behave in that particular way, that they will, if they avoid the big establishments, big hotels, and want to go to the smaller hotels, obviously it's got to have facilities, correct facilities like Wi-Fi, etc., etc. Then finally, what he mentioned to me was there's something called dark kitchen. I hadn't heard of it before. He says dark kitchen is where you don't own a virtual restaurant. You don't have a sitting establishment but you want to supply a particular market, say a market in Nhlanhla, or you want to supply a market in Sandton. You then set up an operation of e-commerce. It becomes a restaurant. So it's a takeaway, typically takeaway. But all you are renting is a kitchen somewhere in Alexandra. People won't even know if it's well, presented on social media or on the internet through e-commerce. You can actually run a big operation online, and people will, all they want is the quality correct, is the, do you deliver on time? If you've promised to deliver within 45 minutes, are you delivering within 45 minutes? Because from Alexandra to Sandton, it's literally 10 minutes, using scooters. So there are opportunities which are coming out of this COVID-19, practical business opportunities. What we need to do, from what you're saying, we need to strengthen our incubation. Would you like to add, Njabulo?
I fully agree with you. I do think that this is an opportunity to think or rethink or reimagine our economy. It's an opportunity for us to actually change South Africa's growth and development model.
That's right.
It has for a long time been based on us using products and services from elsewhere. That's right. To a point that we are generally known to be people who are driven by consumption. What COVID-19 has done is to actually put us in a position where we should drive innovation, drive manufacturing, support each other, open new spaces for growth and development. Indeed, I agree with you that in each and every sector, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's the food business like the one that you've just described, there are now opportunities for us in different areas of our work to actually rethink how we actually can deliver services in a very high standard. That's right. But also at the same time in a way that satisfies our customers. Right. I was just thinking, okay?
Oh, continue.
Oh, I wanted to say what's going to happen now that the formal sector is shrinking is that a lot of us will be sitting at home, just all we are going to have is dreams, So there's now an opportunity to actually take that a dream and actually reimagine the sector that you used to work for and actually build yourself to be a service provider and a competitor in that sector. That's just right. From a different base, as opposed to just being an employee.
Yeah. Njabulo, when we spoke a few days ago, there's something very fascinating that you mentioned. You made an example of the capital adequacy ratios that the bank, as part of the Basel, is it Basel 3 or 4 now? Because
yes,
things have been growing every year. There's Basel, every few years there's Basel 1,
yes.
2, 3, I think it's Basel 4 or 5. Now, as part of that capital adequacy ratio, the banks are required to keep a certain amount of money. But here in this instance, in South Africa, you mentioned that we don't have adequate essential service. Can you just elaborate, maybe explain to the viewer at home, what did you mean by that? If you can.
Okay. A simple example, until this COVID-19 era, some of us never knew that actually 70% of all pharmaceutical products are actually sourced mainly from 2 regions. So of our total supply, 70% of them, it's a combination of China, India, and the Eurozone. Yeah. So now that there's been all these trade bans, all these countries were scrambling, they need medicines for themselves because everyone is in trouble. Suddenly, as a nation, we were exposed. It became very clear that we do need a certain level of production of pharmaceutical supplies that is domestic, so that when we have a situation like the one that has just happened, we are in a position to provide medically for our people. One of the reasons, I argue that one of the reasons why we had to go on an early lockdown is simply because we could not risk more people getting sick at the same time when there are trade bans internationally on some of the medications, because suddenly we discovered that from a demand point of view, everyone needed medicine. And where are we? We are in the southern tip of Africa. We are far away from these markets, and we also needed medicines. Now, if, as the president did, in his position, he had no choice but to actually quickly close and go on an early lockdown, because we could not even afford for people to actually get sick. So you can imagine that if we went on a slightly later lockdown, dealing with too many people who are sick. Now, that calls, in my view, for a minimum level of local production on pharmaceuticals, on retail, on electrical equipment. You know, I'll make you a simple example. With all these field hospitals that we are putting together, sometimes there are elements that have to go on the boilers, as an example. You know, ordinarily we think that no, we'll just import that. Suddenly we realize actually the country that has those elements that are needed for the boiler is in a lockdown. So what are the implications for our health sector? So at no point in the past have we actually thought that there's a strong nexus between the health policy and industrial policy. So what this COVID-19 has done is to actually bring us to that understanding, to say, hey, Bana, you do need to have a minimum level of domestic production, and you can actually export whatever else that is in excess. The same thing happens with rail. We are now talking about the possibility that you know, we must, post the lockdown, we must be more aggressive in the Africa trade. And guess what? Almost half of our rolling stock imports are actually from Asia. You know, and what does it mean? It means that the fact that the production of railway components is external compromises even our ability to trade with other African countries so that we can provide for the livelihoods of our people. That's right. We now know that it will be difficult, for instance, for even us to sell some of our capital equipment. I mean, because South Africa is very good at capital equipment. I mean, whether you go to Zambia, you go to Zimbabwe, you go to the DRC, whatever capital equipment that they use there, that's right, is most likely coming out of South Africa. Now, all these things have put on the table a challenge for us to support Black industrialists. That's right. To support domestic industrial capacity, to make sure that we work with our people, not just where it comes to saying, oh, let us give you a tender. No, no, no. Where we say, let us help you to have the best capability to produce exportable products that can actually compete with the rest of the world. That's a very, very important thing that we need to do. Without that particular support, we may actually find that it will be difficult for us to bounce back from this COVID-19 economic depression.
Njabulo, I want us to go to the last slide. We've got Njabulo put together about 16 slides. I want us to go to the last slide. But before we go to that last slide, I want to talk about my industry. I mean the education and training industry. There is about 12 million learners. Of the 12 million learners, about 600,000 of those in the private sector or private schools, there's about another 400,000, they estimate, of former Model C schools. So there's about 1 million typically learners who would have typically have tablets or access to the internet. Those about 1 million learners that are currently typically active. The other 11 million learners, and then they come from the public institutions. But we know Gauteng has instituted a program, I'm aware, Yama Tablets, which was instituted which commenced about 3-4 years ago. So there's another number of learners who have access to tablets as well. But most of the tablets of the market, of the learners in the education sector, they don't have tablets. So there's about 10 million who don't have tablets. Now the question linked to the industrial program we just mentioned is, are we going to go to China and procure these tablets? Is it not an opportunity for us to say, we put 12 million tablets, obviously you won't produce 12 million, you need to produce more because some are going to break, etc., etc. But you also have the general population other than the learners. So, we've got an opportunity again now to say there's an urgent need for 10 million tablets in the country. We should start a program. We should start a program where this is where innovation comes, Njabulo, as you mentioned earlier. Number 2, reindustrialization program comes to say, we can't go to China, we can't go to South Korea, we can't go out looking for discounts. We should produce, in the country and beyond, supply the rest of the continent. So I just wanted to make that comment that, just to support your statement. But I want us to conclude, Njabulo, because I'm aware you've got another presentation that you need to do now. The strengthening of the economic program, the township economy support that you envisage. Can you just take us through? Njabulo had agreed, Mlalele Kaya, that we can share the slides. So if you'd like the slides, please leave your email address or as part of the comments. We can send the email. We can send you, or we can email you the slides after this presentation. Conclude, Njabulo, before you go to your next presentation. But that strengthening on that slides number 16.
Okay. So here what I was simply trying to do was to map out things that our people are already good at, things that we can actually quickly ramp up.
Right.
I'm always fascinated whenever I drive to the township and to the various spaces closer to where I stay.
Right.
You have people who can actually do painting. You have people who can actually do panel beating.
Yeah.
When your car has issues, they are able to assist. We've got people who are able to do gates, burglar proofing, metal sheets, etc. So in short, our people are very good at light manufacturing.
Right.
What we do need to do between, those who are interested, is to actually have programs to help them to upscale all these light manufacturing initiatives and connect them to institutions such as the SAPS, because those institutions can help with enhancing the quality of the various products.
Right.
It's not just about them saying your product is below standard or it's of a good standard. It's also the feedback that they give to say, okay, go improve there and there and there, in a manner that allows your product to actually be produced at a mass scale. The other thing is that this is now an opportunity for us to grow businesses that can operate from the backyards, literally from the backyards. I mean, if you think about it, the surgical masks that are being produced, the masks, etc., and the detergents, all these things do not require a big factory. All these things require just the backyard, support when it comes to funding, and the logistical business that will transport the goods to your new markets. So, I mean, these are just ideas at a high level to say these are some of the things that we can immediately get into. You know, they don't require high-tech machines that come from elsewhere in the world. I mean, producing furniture, you know, right now, whatever furniture that we need for our field hospitals, that furniture, we are not importing. That furniture is produced internally. What that tells you is that we do have the capability here to actually produce the best furniture, the best consumable goods, the best bicycles. You know, these our people can do. We just need to support them.
You know, it's quite fascinating that you've got the bicycle, and you know, which is an amazing, a very healthy form of transportation. You've got bicycle manufacturing here as well. You know,
yeah.
And with the social distancing, it's actually the best form of transport for the kids.
Transport, yeah.
Continue, Njabulo.
Oh, sorry, our sound got cut. You can continue.
I was saying with social distancing, bicycle, you know, cycling is the best form of transport that the kids can use. It's actually healthy as well. Obviously it has its own challenges as well, which most provinces experience. But I'm just saying, you know, we may have to look at the lessons learned from the last time it was implemented. You know, what mistakes were made and how can we improve and make sure that I see you've got medical consumable hubs, medical recycling as well. Except there's quite a few things still, fabrication hubs. You know, so these are not just a typical projects that, you know, Shisanyama type. You know,
yes.
Yeah, but these are like proper manufacturing.
And these are tradable as well.
Yeah. Njabulo.
These are tradable.
Yeah. What will be your final word to a listener at home, and as you're about to conclude, you know, on the lessons learned, the social impact, and as well as the economic impact of this COVID-19? What is your final word in 2 minutes? Because I know we have.
Okay. So my final word is simply this. Yes, we have been presented with a big challenge. It's a challenge we've never had to deal with. It's a challenge that is going to change our lives, you know, for many, many years to come. But in this particular challenge, there is an opportunity for us to actually turn the challenge into a big opportunity. The government has set aside all sorts of relief programs. Let us try and get in touch with those support for our businesses to be supported. Where possible, the families that will be receiving all these retrenchment packages now have an opportunity to channel those funds away from consumables into building of capacity to produce the various materials that we've just demonstrated here. Thirdly, there's now an opportunity to actually see ourselves not just as people who go to work, but see ourselves as people who can drive the market. Never has there ever been an opportunity for us to transform the South African economy like this period that we are in. Yes, I agree that you know, it's a transformation that has been imposed upon us, imposed on our lives, but it is a transformation that can actually last. You know, it can actually change our lives and our children's lives forever. So we do need to go out there, seize opportunity. Don't just sit back and say, oh, what shall I do? There is an opportunity for us to actually go out there and be aggressive, capture the market. With the support of people like yourself, Nhlanhla, I am sure that there's a lot of guidance that we will receive. And I wish you all the best. Let's continue talking. Let us see how we can help each other, to access the various opportunities. And thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Njabulo. You're a star. Thanks for taking time. I know it's been a very hectic day for you. You know, the Premier has a press conference. We've got a presentation to the United Nations just now and a few other meetings thereafter. Thanks for taking time to be with us. The final message from me is be innovative, be innovative, be innovative. Finally, I'm saying to you, when Isaac was faced with a similar situation in the book of Genesis, there was a famine under the king Abimelech. The Bible says he sowed a seed, and in sowing that seed, the Bible clearly says he reaped a hundredfold, 100-fold in the middle of the famine, in the middle of drought. If you were to look at the similar situations, if you were to compare both, the similar situation, you know, it does appear like it's drought, in as much as it's like drought, but you can still sow a seed. What do you need? You need wisdom. You need innovative thinking. And that's what Njabulo has been saying throughout. Go and consult people who have done this before for incubation, for support, for mentorship, for coaching. Thanks a lot, Njabulo. Thanks a lot, Nhlanhla. God bless you. Keep shining. God bless you. Amen.